Hello and welcome to Week 3's Gameplay Podcast. I'm joined by a load of gameplay experts, and I'll start off by introducing our most regular, and that is, of course, AirJapes. Hello.
Hello, Ben. Happy to be chatting about gameplay, which is different this year. Well, sort of.
More different than it has been,
different.
I think,
Yeah,
maybe.
more different than it has been. Yeah, perhaps not all the mechanics themselves, but other than sprint dribbles, whatever.
Yeah,
we'll get into it.
And we've also got with us JoshXLS. Hello, Josh.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an interesting week of gameplay, getting to grips with a lot of new things and trying to battle against some of the overriding negativity at times. But yeah, I've managed to have some fun.
Nice. And we introduce, first time back after a fairly long time, it is Alex, formerly, of course, the FIFA analyst. Good to have you on.
Afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you for having me as always. Looking forward to sitting down and talking FC 25 gameplay with you all.
Yeah, it's going to be good. All right, well, let's start actually, Alex, just a nice introduction back to the podcast. Interested to know if you have any sort of player reviews for us.
So I actually went for quite a while. I run a Road to Glory. I just decided to use players that I packed, didn't really spend any coins. And I think I got to like Division 3 and I started to get frustrated with like everyone's teams and me not really doing anything. And I kind of looked and was like, I haven't actually bought anyone for my team yet. I've just been lazy with it. So I kind of calculated how much money I had and he was like, I'm going to build my first team. And a player that I picked up, which has been very, very good for me, is Foden. He is a little bit expensive, I think, for RTG sort of players. He's like 120 odd K, I think. But he has been on inside forward or wide playmaker an absolute beauty for me to use. I think the downside to him that I don't like is that he doesn't have like any shooting play styles. So finessing with him can be a little bit kind of frustrating when you're cutting on the inside. But in terms of actually on the ball, using agile dribbling with him, just skill moves, obviously the L1 speed boost, of course. Yeah, he's been a favourite player of mine so far.
Yeah, is he someone that you'd recommend if that's going to be like your most expensive player in your team?
I mean, he is my the most expensive in the attack. But I think for most players, no, only because he's used as a creative player rather than a finisher. But just because, again, with no shooting play styles, I think if he had like a finesse shot or a power shot or even a 𝘃𝘃𝘀𝘀 or something, I'd feel a little bit more confident with it. But no, I would, if I was someone, I wouldn't go out there and spend my whole budget on him. I think you'd probably look at better off spending coins elsewhere. Maybe someone like Neymar, for example.
Yeah, Neymar is really good. Nice. Great. Well, anyone else have any players that you want to mention? Maybe Josh, I think you were saying that even Lewandowski is someone to consider this cycle.
Yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with like slower strikers, and Leather's not completely immobile, but he's always had that knock on him that he's not very quick, but it's definitely to do with his positioning. He's got 90 attack positioning as a base stat, and running him as an advanced forward, he just times his runs incredibly well, seems to get on the end of those kind of incisive passes. I've got Kevin De Bruyne in midfield, and Incisive Pass Plus is just unbelievable at dissecting defenses to the point of, I think, being a bit overpowered because he's picking passes I'm not even seeing. And and Lever, despite only having 75 pace, just gets the run on very fast centre-backs and manages to then stay ahead of them because he's got that 89 strength, he's got the frame to do it, and obviously has always had good finishing. And so I'm enjoying using him. Big shout out for Kevin De Bruyne. He is like very, very, very good. But I don't know. I'm having fun with all kinds of different players. That Fran Navaro, Squad Foundation's SBC, still getting a lot of joy out of using him. There's some games where I feel like he's a player I should be upgrading, but still getting a lot of joy out of him. But I'll go back to a player I think I've mentioned, but Alvarez, his base 84 rated card with Press Proven Plus. If you're having an issue making the ball stick with your striker, he's a very, very good player to let that ball stick, because he just gets that extra second, that extra touch that if you don't have Press Proven Plus, you don't get, and it really opens up a lot of the attacks.
Yeah, and Japes, what about you? Any players you've been using you want to shout out?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's shout out in the same vein as Foden. I've done the exact same thing that Alex did. Like didn't put any money on this year and just sort of played my way into division. I think I'm in, I don't know, maybe Division 2 now, but I went out and bought Jamal Musiala. Woo, baby. He is the truth this year. I started playing around with Shadow Striker, and I did, Ben, I think I was telling you actually how much I disliked Shadow Striker. And then I got a plus Musiala on Shadow Striker, and I was like, wait a second. This movement is fundamentally different. And so getting him in has been just awesome because he is really, really good. So I'll give him a shout out. And then I think there's a lot of like really good kind of cheap options in other positions. I'll shout out Ona Batlle. I don't think I'm going to mispronounce her name, but obviously she got a lot of hype last year. She had a team of season for 𝘵𝘂𝗎 women. She could play left back or right back, has whipped jockey, anticipate, rapid, quick step, and relentless, and she's under 4K. And it's just like I don't have a chemistry style on her yet because I generally don't like spending shadows on cheap players just because I feel like I'll just go pick up eventually I'll be able to find like an Ona Batlle with the shadow on her for the exact price as like a regular gold one. But I don't even have shadow on her, and she like never gets outrun feeling because of the quick step and rapid. I know I will die on this hill. I know rapid's not supposed to impact players when they don't have the ball, but I swear it does. I swear they're faster. I swear they are.
Yeah, it's funny actually talking about pace. A player that I wanted to mention that I've been actually fairly impressed with is Declan Rice as a holding defensive midfielder who isn't particularly fast, but is somewhat lengthy. And it's not to say lengthy's back as such in the same way it was previously, but I think people have kind of ignored the sort of lengthy factor, and it is still quite important. Like I was noticing, Josh, Lewandowski is mostly lengthy, right? And that could be having a bit of an impact on his ability to catch players. I know, Japes, you're talking about Tar on the content pod, supporter episode, by the way. And he's also, very lengthy. And I think if you look out for those lengthy players in those, I guess, central defensive and attacking positions, I think you can get an advantage from that when maybe they don't have the best pace on paper. So, worth considering. I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that, Alex, actually. I know you're a fan of the big man previously. Have you experimented much with that?
Oh, I've tried using big men, and it's been tough, actually. It's been tough. I think,
is that because of the dribbling that you find it too tricky?
I find dribbling, I don't understand why or how, just substantially worse than last year. I think when we loaded up 𝗵𝐶24, I was like, wow, left sit dribbling's like not that bad. I don't have to use agile dribbling to feel somewhat competent on the ball. And like, yes.
And when you say agile dribbling, just to be clear, what would that be?
This year it's L2R2. They moved it from, it used to be R1 back in the day. I think that was 2 years ago. We used to do that on FIFA 23. And then 𝗵𝐶24 came about and you didn't need to do agile dribbling. You could just left sit dribble instead. So you didn't have to hold R1. Then they moved it to L2R2. Didn't really use it that much last year, but then this year I'm kind of using it a little bit more just to get a little bit more kind of shimmy out of my players. But left sit dribbling on its own, I just find really tough with like your average players. I've used obviously like players in draft who are much better at dribbling and it doesn't feel as bad. But for us mere mortals who haven't got ridiculous amount of coins to kind of go out there, normal sort of players, it does feel tough. So in doing that, big men have been a little bit of a struggle. You shouldn't be dribbling with them anyway, but I find when trying to use big men, a lot of times I run semi-crossing, you're trying to put a cross in and the cross is where you want it to be. And then it's like the attacker doesn't always lock on, like they lock onto the ball, but they overshoot it or undershoot it and they don't really get on to get that header. So that can be a little bit more difficult to use big men. And then I think really the biggest issue for them is you lay the ball into their feet where you could obviously just like sprint or skill move and, use that big power and pace to get past defenders. It's all about the L1 speed boost, and L1 speed boost with big men doesn't work anywhere near as effective. So actually trying to get past defenders, their recovery rate is just so much. You really struggle to use a big men kind of as efficiently, I think, as last year.
Yeah, that makes sense. Funnily enough, talking about pace still, we did get this question from 𝘭𝑪CVL. I'm not sure I can pronounce it as a word. He said, with tactics being so different, any chance we have a year where Kroos is good? As an old head, that would put a smile on my face. Now for newer listeners, this was always a sort of meme thing. If we had an interview with the gameplay producers, we'd always say, is Toni Kroos going to be usable this year? And of course, they said, he's going to be more usable than he ever was before. And whether that actually worked out was, very much up for debate. And of course, players with low pace tend to get superseded fairly quickly. But I guess there are a lot of other things that are factored in the game now with the playstyles, I guess Accelerate, and now with Roles Plus and Roles Plus Plus. Do we think, Japes, that Kroos would be someone you'd be using right now if he was actually in the game? And therefore, it's obviously a shame he isn't.
I would certainly be considering him for, like, I've used I guess he's going to be a little bit faster, but what is his name? 𝗵𝗽𝗄𝘃 from Leverkusen. He's like 69 pace, so maybe a little bit faster, but sort of plays. I use this like holding CM in this 4-1-2-2 narrow that I've played, and basically I just sort of ask them to like chill out in the midfield and ping some passes around. And Kroos could do it. He could definitely do it, and would probably be pretty good there. So maybe someday we'll get that icon card. But
yeah, I mean, he'll probably have like reasonable pace though. But yeah, Alex, what about you? Do you think this is more a year for a slower midfield player, for example?
I actually think you could use Kroos at the start of last year's game. I used him quite a bit myself because of the long ball pass. And obviously, every man and their dog is using it. Like using players with long ball pass this year as well, just because of how strong it is and how people are kind of struggling to break people down. Long ball pass can help with that. So yeah, I think you could. I mean, it depends to what degree. I always have this conversation that anyone is usable in your own world. Like you can use anyone and have great success with it. It's only if you're trying to compete with the world's best, pros. You want to get into the elite division and you want to just play champs and get a good finishing champs. You can use basically almost anyone. One of my good friends last year was using 𝗵𝗍𝘰𝗰 up front and Boniface. This was at the very start of the game and they had no pace whatsoever, and using Kroos in the midfield part. So you can use them. It's just, again, dependent on what level we're trying to get to. I think with the idea and principle of FC IQ and with player roles, yes, those sort of players hopefully will show their kind of IQ a little bit more in the game. But obviously that's take it with a pinch of salt, I suppose. But the issue that I have, I think the longer you go in on the game, why would you use someone like Kroos? Yes, not available, but someone who's on the slower end of like pace and really brings everything with their passing ability, when you could probably just go and get a card that A is quicker, it has a little less passing stats, but can shoot, can then dribble, can defend, because that's just what happens. Within the first month or two, we get cards that are just a lot more well-rounded. So why would you go for someone that's such a niche sort of card, I'd say?
Yeah, very good point. And I think we're going to take an early-ish break here, and then we'll be back to answer Tim Jacko's question, which was, what are the best early gameplay tips, especially for lower division/ranked players? An interesting one. And yeah, we'll cover it in just a second. Hello, welcome back after the break. Right, let's get into these early gameplay tips. And, we might discuss some of them in a bit more depth in a second, but let's go around, give a tip, and maybe we'll go around again. Right. Josh, let's come to you actually. What would you say is your top tip at the start of the cycle?
So there's a thing called the L1 speed boost. No, I'll go for something that's like maybe not talked about as much, and especially something that might give you... I see a lot of complaints from people that it feels like they have no time on the ball, that they're losing the ball a lot, can't dribble, all that kind of stuff. And I absolutely agree, it's a bit more difficult this year. It's not just the stat drop-off, it's definitely a little bit harder. Shielding is really, really effective this year. Holding L2, especially if you want to have those bigger players, if you're running two strikers up top, it's definitely worth holding down that left trigger and just trying to like get a little bit of space to control the ball, lay it off to a midfielder, give your team time to move. If you've set up this tactic where you want your players to run in certain directions and create space for somebody, you need to give them time to do so rather than just trying to like ping past your way up the pitch like it kind of felt like last year. So that'd be one thing. The other thing I would say is more tactically, and I think we're going to talk about this later in a slightly different sense, but I see a lot of people running the same position or the same role, on both of their strikers. And I think you get a lot less out of the roles if you have two of the same roles. I see a lot of people running poacher. I've seen people run two target man and go, well, when I run one target man, it's really, really good and they're really effective. But now I've got two of them, it's not working as well. And I think it's the depth of their runs. It's where they're running from. And it allows an entire defensive line to move with that depth if you're running them on the same role. Whereas if you have a poacher that's trying to get in behind, or an advanced forward that's trying to get in behind, and a target player or a false nine, you are going to create easier passing opportunities or more through balls in behind if you've got two different runners, because you're going to be separating that defense if they're trying to man mark, or you're going to just have a player in acres of space if they're running with the runner in behind. So yeah, I think there's that tactically is a mistake I'm seeing a lot of people make. Just they've heard poachers overpowered, and so double poacher regardless of which strikers they've got in position, and it's very easy. I've found it very easy to defend against.
Yeah, that is a really good point, actually. Nice. Let's move on to a second gameplay tip, and we'll have that from Alex. Alex, go ahead.
Play the way you are facing. It's very, very simple. Well, I say simple. It's not simple necessarily, because when you're being pressed at times, when you want to play, say, to someone that's at 2:00 and you're facing 9:00, to try and dribble and face that person can be a little bit difficult. But either way, when you want to pass the ball, think of it like a kind of cone coming out of your player with their vision, that kind of goes, I don't know, probably about 80, probably 100 degrees or so, a little bit more, and essentially play within that kind of vision cone. Because when you try and play a pass that's a little bit more than that, it is really, really difficult to get it to where you want. So you want to play a pass to someone, look at them, make sure your body, your actual body, the chest of the person that you are controlling, and their head is facing that way. Because if you try and face back towards your own goal and send a through ball down the line, or just a simple ground pass to someone that's, in the opposite direction, it doesn't really let you this year. Now, yes, there are anomalies. Sometimes you can do long ball passes. People that have that play style, they can get away with it a little bit more. But it's just a general good practice to have, that if you want to play a pass, face a person that you want to play to, and you will find your passing to be so much more successful.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Do you think it's worse this year? Because they did say they made it worse, right?
Yeah.
Playing blind passes.
Yes, it is, definitely. They wanted to stop these 180-degree no-scope passes, as I like to call them. I don't think they've stopped it to, the full degree. As I said, you use someone like Patry in the middle, Kimmich, anyone that has this long ball pass, Bruno, they can get away with it a little bit more, especially if you play a lock as well. It doesn't really seem to matter as much. But just for the normal sort of cards, you want to play, like the one where I'm really guilty of it is, I run down, I'm defending, I'm tracking a through ball, I come across, I shoulder barge a player off the ball, I'm facing towards the corner flag, I then try and play the pass into a centre mid or the fullback who's on, that too much of a harsh angle, and it's 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 who, hasn't got the agility. He's trying to then do it, and he's like, well, hang on a minute, I can't do that. And then he ends up falling over, playing the most pathetic pass, and you give the ball back to the opponent. So, yes, I think for most cards it's kind of noticeable, apart from, as I said, a few anomalies.
I didn't realize you'd been watching my gameplay. Yeah, great tip. Let's move on to Japes.
I'll piggyback this a little bit, because I think it's useful for people to think about. And it's when you are trying to perform a pass or a shot, even anytime you're trying to send the ball away from your player, the more difficult skill you're trying to execute, the more in control of your pace you need to be with the player. And so, what I mean by this is, if you are going to, even if you have someone like Patry in the midfield and you are going to try to send a long ball to the opposite wing, you should not be sprinting, period. If you're trying to play a pass directly, like a pinged pass, especially 90 degrees to a player that's not particularly close, and you are sprinting forward, you're going to have a harder time executing that pass than if you are not sprinting at all. And so I think it's just useful in your brain to think about, how challenging realistically is the pass that I am trying to play? The more challenging it is, realistically, the less you should be sprinting, and the more body control you need for your player, especially obviously playing the way you're facing. So it's kind of like a subtle lay off the sprint button, but also it's even when you are sprinting, and even if you're going to take a shot, if you're running 90 degrees across the top of the box and you're going to try to take a shot at the near post, well, you'd better time that power shot green, because for most players, otherwise, it's not going to go particularly well.
Yeah, okay. Another very good tip. Josh, you basically did too, so I'll allow you a pass on the second round. But Alex, anything you would like to add as an additional gameplay tip?
I think a big thing, which again, I've kind of been pushing this sort of agenda over the last few years, is something I didn't really think about when I first started playing the game. I just kind of looked at what pros were doing and was like, oh, I must get this player, I must get that player. Playing more so to how you want to enjoy the game and your play style. So, for example, if you want to use big men or you want to look for through balls, you want to hit on the counter, building your team around that and then actually using it in game. So I picked up 𝗵𝗪, put her into my team on zero chem, long ball pass, and then I was running both my wingers and inside forward. And then I felt that other than obviously, yes, straight line kind of in behind, I wasn't really getting the opportunity to use that long ball pass to play out of the press when I want because, they're not always making those sort of runs. So then I changed and, had a proper winger who was going to be there getting chalk on the boots. And then it gave me an out ball every single time to play that over the top through ball. So I played 𝗵𝗪 at right CM, play that over the top through ball to my left winger. I can then trigger 𝘍𝘪 on a run in the middle, look to get across into the box for him. And it just kind of gives me a simple pattern for me to rely on time and time again. It's how I enjoy playing the game. I like using big men. Want to be able to do that. How's the quickest way I can get into a crossing position? Bang, doing that. So just you thinking about how you want to build up, how you want to attack, how you want to defend, what is it that you want to do, and just playing into that play style and kind of not getting caught into the trap of doing what every Tom, Joe, and Harry is doing. Just kind of go with how you want to play and enjoy the game, and you will get results from it as well. I will also throw in a bonus tip. I found myself doing this more this year than ever because I feel like I'm a stinker nowadays and what I used to be. I feel like I have to go back and recycle. I get the ball on my left wing. If I can't beat that fullback, go back and use the fullbacks. Just pass back to your fullback, recycle back into centre mid and look to go again. I don't feel like I can kind of just not really think about what I'm doing and just play like I used to be able to over previous years and just win games that way. I'm having to really make a conscious effort to think about it. And what that means for me is recycling, going back into my fullbacks, then into centre mid. Can I find a pass into the striker? Do I have to go out to the opposite side of the wing? Can I just work the opponent and try and get them to move their pieces around and find gaps from that? That's fine. I'll do it that way. So little bonus tip there.
Yeah, great bonus tip. Japes, an additional tip from you perhaps?
I feel like there's like so many directions that I could go. Baseline, if you're struggling with defending, don't pull center backs out of position. Just don't do it. It's the easiest way to get scored on this year. Like their AI is maybe a little bit too strong and they won't move out of their shape if you don't tell them to, whether either by pulling them out yourself or by calling second man press. And baseline, unless you're in like kind of like high levels, people are going to have a harder time breaking that down.
Yeah, actually I was going to say my point, which was kind of similar to your stop sprinting as much and play the way you're facing, is use regular passes more and through balls less. The amount of times I see players giving away the ball because they played a through ball when they could have just passed or driven past is kind of crazy. And it's especially bad at the start of the cycle where people are less used to the fact that players with worse passing are going to play pretty bad through balls at times, especially if they don't have incisive pass, which makes a fairly big difference. So yeah, just look out for situations where you're playing through balls where you could just be passing it. And also the positions that you're actually playing through balls in, because they are higher risk and you don't want to be in a situation where you're playing a through ball when there's a good chance it could cause a turnover and they get a counter. So I think that would be my top kind of straightforward tip. More passing, less through balls. And Japes, it's funny, you mentioned the centre-backs and how their positioning is quite important. There was a point you made off pod, which I think is worth mentioning, about the risks of using different roles on your centre-backs. I don't know whether you want to elaborate for the listeners.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if it's truth or speculation at this point, but it feels different. If I'm playing a 4-back especially, and I use 2 different types of roles on my center backs, oftentimes I feel like my line gets kind of goofed up. And so I've sort of just taken to using the same role for both center backs. And I feel like my defense is a lot more structured when I do that. And I guess it makes sense. Like if you look at the different categorizations of where they'll take positions up in the attack, with how counter happy FC players are and will be in perpetuity, your players because they're moving differently to support build up, they end up in goofy spots and it leaves gaps. And I've just found keeping them both on like either like right now I think in my 4-1-2-1-2 I'm playing both on ball playing defender, but I like defender like, do you know what I mean, the basic defender one, I like that one too. Ball playing defender is like similar, they just move a little further forward. But then you've got ones like, I think it's stopper, where they like move forward but differently. Like they get more aggressive pushing forward, and if you don't have both on that, you end up with one that's kind of push forward and one that's not. So, much, I suppose, like in, it's just one of those tricky things. Like in real football, you would want your center backs obviously communicating and holding a strong line together, because if not, you give up easy through balls, and that seems to be happening here on this game. And it might just be that we don't have enough like plus defenders that are like aware of, the world around them at this point in time. But so maybe that'll change. But at least right now, you're certainly adding risk by putting them on different roles, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Have you tried both being on ball playing, for example? Because obviously you think that's a bit more exposing, but actually if they're both on it, maybe it's fine. You think it's fine?
Yeah, I think they both seem to interact together. I also, though, have my setup's like a little bit weird because I've put my DM on come between the center back or center half, which means that both of them are sort of like pushing up and out wide together, and they'll both drop in going defensively at the same pace when my DM goes back into the midfield. So I don't know.
So you're actually playing like a 3-5-2 style 4-1-2-1-2.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah,
interesting. Do you want to share the code after the break?
Sure. I can't promise that I'll stick with it, but that's where we'll be right now.
We'll do that after this break. Hello, listener. An important announcement. If you're playing 𝘵cie_25 and thinking, it'd be nice to play Rush with some like-minded teammates, perhaps even some listeners of the podcast, perhaps even some hosts of the podcast, then we've set up in the supporter Discord an area where you can matchmake or find others to play with in Rush. There's voice chats there for you to join. It's very easy to use. If you're a gold or icon supporter and are unsure how to join the Discord because you haven't done so already, it's pretty easy to do that as well. There is a link in the description of all the podcasts released through Patreon, which explains how to do that if you haven't done so already. If you're on the bonus podcast tier, so not gold or icon, it's very easy to upgrade too if you fancy it. And of course, it's helping the podcast more and you're getting loads of perks in return too. And if you're not a supporter at all, then, maybe consider joining on the gold or icon tier and you will, as I said, get access to the Discord, including that Rush matchmaking system and plenty more as well. So if that interests you, then do search Support Foot Weekly in your search engine. A huge thank you if you do consider doing that. It really does help the podcast. For now, though, let's jump back into this episode. Hello, welcome back after the break. So we will get into that tactic, but Alex, you had something you wanted to raise on the whole centre-back thing before we do that.
Yeah, I think with centre-backs, the big thing that I'm noticing is if you are, say, you win the ball on the edge of your box and, you're trying to play out, if you lose the ball kind of in that transition in your own half, your centre-backs are naturally kind of splitting quite wide. They're kind of moving out a little bit, from what I'm noticing, regardless of what you've got them on. So they're naturally splitting a little bit. And then what's happening is the opposing strikers staying centrally. So if you turn the ball over 35 yards out from your own goal, 40 yards out, they can literally just play a simple through ball straight down the middle and you're then frantically trying to get your centre-backs back over to cover. So I'm trying to find out if there's anything we can do to stop that. But in the meantime, don't turn the ball over in your own half. But it sounds easier, than it actually is. But that's something that I'm kind of noticing, which is proving to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, I definitely found it made a big difference when I just put Rice in there on holding ++ just to sit in. And he is generally there, even in build-up. So it hasn't been too bad. But yeah, there are still gaps to exploit if they're smart about how they feed the ball to the striker. Josh, anything for you that's worth adding on the centre-back situation?
It's a tough one this year. Like, I've not really had too many issues with the splitting of the centre-backs. My issue is more that they seem dumb in terms of covering. So, like, especially if you're somebody who likes to play with attacking fullbacks, they won't shuffle across like a normal back line will. And they especially won't shuffle across even like, so I've tried Japes' 4-1-2-1-2 and the DM that should drop between the centre-backs, you'd think, okay, well, he's dropped in, the centre-back will then go wide. And they tend not to do that. And if you drag the centre-back over, they don't then shuffle across to kind of help you out. So trying to maintain a defensive shape is the most important thing. And as Alex says, turning it over in your own half, it's very difficult to maintain a defensive shape. I would say that I just think defend as a role, the defender role is the best role. I don't like either ball playing or stopper just yet. I've not found either of them to be better than just normal defending. I actually think there's quite a lot more that you can do manually this year defensively and that you get rewarded for compared to previous years. But that being said, you can very easily pull your team out of shape. And so, you have to time when you're going to go and grab a defender correctly this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. Right, I'm sure Japes is probably now ready with the code. I was going to say, actually, for those who don't know, if you go on the 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 squad builder, you can now input in-game codes into 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦, and it will show you the tactic in the squad builder. So if you're listening to this podcast and want the specifics, then head over there, put in the code Japes is about to read, and you can see the whole thing. So Japes, fire away with the code.
Yeah, do we know if these are case sensitive?
They are, I think. Yeah.
They are. All right. It is lowercase g as in Gary, ampersand, 4, K as in Kevin, capital D as in dog, 1, X, S, 7, capital C, ampersand.
Nice.
There you go. The gist of it is it's a 4-1-2-1-2 narrow, balanced build-up, high defensive approach, and it plays kind of like a 3-4-1-2 in attack. And this is what got me to Division 2, not super handily, but like pretty handily. The caveat here is like you should be a pretty good manual defender to do this. You're gonna ask your center backs to defend for sure. And so if that's not something you feel particularly comfortable with, I guess I'm using my wing backs, or I'm using my left back and my right back both on attacking wing back balanced. So they're pretty aggressive, but you could probably just use them on normal wing back and they won't get as aggressive moving forward, but probably would help out more defensively. I don't know. You could tweak it. Go nuts. What's the worst that happens? You put the code in again, it pops right back up.
Yeah, good point. That does actually make it a lot easier to tweak. I'll just put it in twice and then you got the original version there for you if you don't have all the tactic slots filled. Josh, you've been playing it. Any particular observations you wanted to make?
Yeah, so I changed from the attacking wingback balance to attacking wingback attack. Just because I felt like if I'm going to kind of leave myself with 3 defenders anyway, I may as well get the most out of those wingbacks. And I kind of like to have that width as an extra option. It means you can overload. It does mean if you come up against somebody who's in an incredibly aggy like 4-4-2 with both of the wingers being super high up, that you can get, there are very easy outballs for them. But I prefer high scoring games to ones that are low scoring, but I can eke out a win. And so 6-5 is better than 1-0, even though they're both a 1-goal win. But yeah, like that was kind of my initial variation on it. The holding left midfielder is an interesting one because I would enjoy it more, I think, if they moved a bit more centrally, but they tend to kind of just sit a little bit wider on the left. And for me, that player needs to be left-footed. Most of the passes I was playing would be infield on their left or round out to the overlapping wing back. And so you kind of want that curve to go around the defense. And so I found trying to use right-footed players in that holding midfield spot difficult. It wasn't quite perfect. I also just don't like cams this year in general. I feel like all of the cam roles don't do what you want them to do. I think there's maybe a bit of a wider problem here that we can maybe talk about with the IQ in general, which is that it feels too linear at times. Like there's space to run into. I don't care what role I've got you on. If there's nobody between you and the goal and you're a striker, run forward. Like that should be really obvious, but it's not. And there are even like examples of, especially attacking mids, even when they're on shadow strikers, like pointing in front of them as if I'm going to run into that space. And then you play the ball and they've stopped their run. And you're like, well, you pointed, and you also should have just run into that space. So yeah, it's a fun formation. I definitely like the ability to have the quicker interchange up front. Again, passing generally in the way that you're facing, or at least if you're playing a kind of 90-degree pass, make it a very lightly played pass that's not, the player has to be nearby. You're not trying to force a ball too far. I've really enjoyed having David Alaba in the holding centre mid role, the SBC. He's been very.
Oh, you did
good.
the SBC.
I did the SBC. Well, I packed Rudiger untradeable, and I was kind of like,
such a menu grinder.
I just kind of need it, so I got him. So, and he performs that role very, very well. And I've got a second variation of it where I change that central midfield role from holding to box, just so that he can get forward a bit more if I feel like I'm struggling, if I need a goal and I'm kind of going a little bit all out. So yeah, it's definitely a fun formation. It's not my favorite, but it's definitely worth giving a go. I think trying a whole bunch of different tactics and formations this year is going to be the way to go. No one has found the meta formation yet, however many capital letters they put in their tweet.
To me.
No, honestly.
Come on.
Is it 4-2-3-1 or is it 4-4-2 or is it 4-5-1 or is it 5-4-1? Is it both strikers on poacher or is it honestly? It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. I use people's tactics, but edit them, make them work for your team. Think about how they might work and change it. And it's like have some ability to think for yourself and try things.
Also, some things will work for your brain and they won't work for someone else's. Who gave me a 4-2-3-1 to try, and it's hot garbage for me. Like absolute hot garbage. And I don't like it at all. But this formation seems to work for me, and it's because I don't like spin around with my like wide players and wait for like runs that way. Like it doesn't work. I need more players in the middle to kind of like play through a defense, which is why like this 4-1-2-1-2 works for my brain. So just be aware of the passes also that you're looking for. It's like this game for sure is like a different strokes thing.
Yeah, and actually just quickly, Josh, you mentioned about having two different tactics set. I just wanted to highlight how important that is going to be going into this first Champs weekend to have multiple setups. And there are obviously various D-pad options that you can use. And I would encourage people to use them because I think especially the get players into the box.
How do you change those, Ben?
By pressing the D-pad.
No, I was going to say the tactics because you can quick switch tactics as well.
You can, yeah, it's really easy. I mean, obviously you could do that before to your, different variations. But basically the way you do that is by going into the tactics menu via team management, and then you can actually just duplicate one of your tactics and it'll appear as another tactic but not active. And so you can change that to whatever you like. You can, change players' position a bit, set the roles and all that kind of thing. And then when you go in-game, you press left on the D-pad and it will show you the options for the different tactics that you have preset. And yeah, I'd really encourage people to do that, even if you're maybe using one of the default tactics as a more aggressive one, but just with the players in the positions you want, all that kind of stuff is going to help you a lot to kind of manage the game state in something like Champs, or if you're playing playoffs this week as well. And that's something I wanted to kind of move on to with the fact that Champs is coming this weekend, Alex, and I'm not convinced we're going to see a patch for this L1 speed boost thing. Are there any particular defensive tips you'd have for people trying to defend the L1 speed boost?
Don't get caught in by it as soon as someone lays the ball into their front three, front four, whatever they've got. Most people are very obvious with it in the sense of that they're going to stand you up, they're going to wait for you to commit, and they're going to try and speed boost past you. So think more about where are they going to speed boost into, because it's going to be on a straight line, whichever way they go. Obviously, yes, they can go on a diagonal, but essentially it's in that straight line. So thinking about where is the danger and going into that danger rather than where they are with the ball, because it's like a kid in a candy shop. They're going to be like, "Here's the candy, come and get the candy," and you're going to be like, "Oh, get it," and then you snatch it away. So try your hardest to not constantly kind of step in with that. I think as well for players, don't get caught into, this is more from the attacking point of view, but don't get caught into yourself of constantly looking for that L1 speed boost. Yes, show that you can do it and be scared of it, because then what's going to happen is the opposing defender is going to do what I've just said there. They're going to look to drop off and cover into that space, meaning if you've got someone with finesse shot, 𝘵𝑃𝑉𝑒𝑙𝑎, power shot, you then can have the space to look for that as a different sort of angle and a different sort of threat. It's all about that variety for you. So it is going to be difficult to kind of defend it, but you just really, really have to think very hard about that space. Think about it. really, it's no different in the sense of when someone would stand you up last year with a step over, they're going to go one way or the other. They're going to go slightly to the left or slightly right. Very rarely would someone step over and carry on going in a straight line. With the speed boost, it's going to be draw you in, bang, I'm then going, kind of into that straight line. Another thing you can do with it is to kind of double team up on it. If there isn't, a winger, let's say on the outside, and you can bring your fullback over with second man press to help cover that different angle, and you can kind of tag team on it. That's going to make things a little bit easier for you. If someone does get past you with a speed boost, it's probably going to be someone that's not as physical. You've just got to use your advanced defending, look to shoulder barge, get that player off the ball and say, no, this is mine, and then kind of play out from there. But best of luck with it, and I hope everyone doesn't get too frustrated with it.
Yeah, I was actually thinking, just going into your first maybe playoffs or champs, are there any particular kind of mentality type tips you'd have for the listeners? Maybe, things that might just get them that extra win because they're going to be extra sort of prepared or kind of capable, even if it's not sort of gameplay related as such.
I think one of the big things, and I've only done this in the last day or so and I've been guilty of it, is I was kind of testing out different formations and just playing. So I want to try 4-2-3-1. I just had it set up so I had a 4-2-3-1 and nothing else. Making sure you've got, so now I've made it so I've got a tactic that I start the game in, a 4-2-4 that I change into, to put on pressure when I'm losing, and then a 4-2-3-1 to help me see out the game. Having different tactics for different game scenarios is something you have to do, so you're not pausing it, especially as well, because it's different menus and a different tactic system. Before, I could go and change to a 4-2-4 from scratch in a heartbeat, no problem, because I knew where everything was. Trying to do that with 𝘵𝑐𝗰𝗀𝘀 in the middle of a game when you got 30 seconds and then repause it, it's just complicated. So just take 30 minutes or so, set up those tactics so you've got that, and that will help you massively. To kind of go on to that as well, I've said this multiple times on the podcast before for you. The first weekend, in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter. You're not going to remember it in a year's time. Yes, it's important in the moment, try your hardest, win the game, but once that game is done, it doesn't matter. Move on to the next one. I always say that the most important game is the one you're in, and it's also the least important because you're going to forget about it in the next 2 days. So don't get too caught up on the rank and the finish. Go out there, play some nice football, have some fun with it, and what will be, will be.
Yeah, that's a really important point to make. And we will wrap up just with something that isn't really gameplay related, but I think could be very helpful for people. And that is that, Josh, you've been investigating how to get more season points from outside of Ultimate Team. And, it seems like you've been having some success doing it efficiently, which is interesting to note.
Oh, yeah. I've started playing some career mode, and I'm the player career for the first time in years. Like the last time I played would have been maybe like 16 when I played a career mode. So it's very different. But you can get like 3,000 XP in less than 20 minutes. There's so many easy tips and tricks that you can do. Player career, for example, if you start with your own pro, do it custom, give your skill set as pro, you get like 80 skill points to apply, so you can max out a skill category. That's one of the season things ticked off. If you do a player career as Haaland, you win the Ballon d'Or in November. You can just sim to it if you want. That's another season thing ticked off. The weekly stuff is so easy to do. They've made it slightly longer because you actually have to play 5 games now in both player and career, but you can set them to 3-minute halves. You can set it to beginner difficulty, score a goal and just sit there with the ball at your feet and do something else for the next 6 minutes. So it's definitely a way to get quickly through the season pass. And if you want to get some extra packs, and or even if you don't do it now, but get further down the line and go, oh, I'm not sure I've got enough SP to finish the season pass, there is loads to be claimed in both clubs, player career and manager career mode. So did a video on 𝘵𝘅𝘍's main channel this weekend. So if you want some tips on how to do it, go and check that out, or just come and ask in the Discord, or tweet me at @JoshXLS_, and I'll happily give some hints and tips.
Nice.
Level 25 at the moment, by the way. Level 25.
Wow. So I was going to say, actually, the Discord, worth mentioning, of course, for Gold or Icon supporters, it is buzzing at the moment. Plenty of rush going on, and there are now dedicated days to sort of concentrate the matchmaking on Mondays and Thursdays to play rush. So, if you need some rush points, then do jump in there if you're a Gold or Icon supporter. And of course, if you're not a supporter at all, you may want to support. You get double the podcast content, loads of extra advice as well in the Discord. if you would like to, then just search Support Foot Weekly. It's a really good time to do it as well because there's a 36,000 FC points giveaway going on at the moment. Right. Thank you very much to all our guests here. First of all, Alex, great to have you back on the pod, and thank you very much for all your advice.
Yeah, been an absolute pleasure. Appreciate everyone listening. Obviously, if you have any questions or anything you want to reach out to, AlexBee Official on Twitter or X, and I'll be happy to help you if I can.
Be like buzzing, not like the letter.
You got it.
As in the honey.
Nice. And thank you very much as well to Josh. Been good to have you on.
Yeah, it's been great, and be interesting to see how the first Champs weekend goes. We'll reconvene next week.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And thank you very much as well to Japes. Always good to have you.
Cheers. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's been good. Thank you very much to all you listeners for tuning in. A reminder, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. And, of course, on YouTube. If you're over there, then do drop a like, leave a comment. It really helps. And, of course, again, you can support via Patreon. Just search Support Foot Weekly. A big thank you to all those supporters supporting the pod and keeping it going, including those icon patrons. Dave B, Hugh J, Jeff B, Darren W, Warren A, Stephen M, Waterman, Dan W, Roger D, Rob P, Lee A, Dom P, L M, Damon H, The Shirt Locker, Alex M, Tom B, Jake S, Neil P, Michael K, David G, Andrew R, Michael H, Jimmy K, Brendan T, 𝘵𝘀𝗍𝗫, Michael B, Brian V, Josh R, Brent P, Rob W, and 𝘵𝘂𝘐. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. Ultimate Team is a bit like life really. It has its many ups and downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.